Hi everyone, so I decided to do a video about obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, eating disorders, ADHD, basically lots of things regarding mental health and how it's affected me and my experiences, the things I do to get me through it. And I would like to say a quick disclaimer. Basically, a piece of advice that I'm going to give has come from a professional source. However, I myself am not a professional. I will also provide the sources of where this information has come from, because I do think if you are struggling with OCD or anxiety, these sources are going to be absolutely paramount into your recovery, and they're sources you can access immediately, and they're also free. So it's extremely important, especially right now. We are in quarantine, and I thought, since I've got the time, I'll do this video and really talk about what I've been through and how I think it might help other people as well. So basically, if you're not sure what OCD is, it's, in a simplistic term, it's unwanted thoughts, and those unwanted thoughts will urge you to do some kind of physical or mental compulsion in order for you to get rid of those thoughts. Now, one of the reasons why I want to talk about it so much is because so many people don't realize they have it. And because OCD can have such a hold on yourself, it has led people to commit suicide because they believe OCD is not OCD but their real self, and they're afraid they're going to be a danger to themselves or somebody else, and because they've been petrified and too ashamed to talk about it, they've taken their life. And this even includes, for example, mothers who are afraid they're going to hurt their own children because of the thoughts that they're getting, when in actual fact it was OCD. There's been a lot of cases like this, and it's really upsetting and awful, and I still think that there isn't enough dialogue on OCD specifically yet. And had I known how common it was when I was diagnosed, I think it would have been life-changing for me. So that's basically, why I'm doing this video. So I'm going to run through a couple of questions, common questions about it. The next question is it genetic? It has been shown to be genetic, and for the most part, mental health issues and things like that do run in my family. OCD, it is genetic. That's not to say you'll definitely get it, or if you have a child, they'll definitely have it, but it's really good to sort of be aware that is a factor. What types of OCD are there? So again, if you see me looking down, I've just got all my notes here just to keep me right, because there's a lot to go through. So what types of OCD are there? There's loads. Some of the main ones, and I'll give a brief description for each, is pure OCD. Pure OCD is usually where it's just purely mental thoughts, mental triggers and things like that. So it's all coming from your mind rather than like a physical thing, if that makes sense. There's of course physical OCD, so that would compel you to do some kind of physical avoidance behaviour to try and alleviate some of the pain or anxiety that the thought is giving you. So for one person, for example, who's having like an unwanted thought, they might do some kind of mental compulsion to get rid of it, and they could be sitting right there and you'd never know they were doing it. Physical compulsion could be, for example, very classic one, washing your hands constantly. That's basically how OCD seems to be known to people, is a hand washing thing, which isn't always the case, if at all. There is POCD, that is paedophilia OCD, really brutal one. I've never experienced it myself, but it is quite a common one. It's a common one in new parents especially. But like I said, it can hit anyone, and that is literally having unwanted thoughts about paedophilia. It doesn't make you a paedophile, absolutely not. And for someone who probably has no idea what OCD is and they hear this, they probably think, what on earth? Like, that sounds really bad or serious. Trust me, it's just OCD, and we will get into it. And there's also relationship OCD or ROCD. And that basically is intrusive thoughts about your relationship, about do you really love them, things like that. And it sort of just basically obsesses over your relationship. That's the kind of theme that it likes to work on. There's false memory OCD. And again, you can get all of these OCDs mixed into one, or they can jump from one theme to the other. It just depends. But false memory OCD is where you have images in your mind, or you create a false memory and you believe that false memory to be true. And it could be any horrible thing that your brain can think of, because your brain can think of anything. That is the power of your brain, and it can give you unwanted images and believe that they happened. False memory OCD is quite a strong one. There is also HOCD, which is basically, it's like harm OCD. So harm OCD is when you are petrified that you have harmed somebody or harmed yourself. Again, these can tie into other ones such as false memory OCD, POCD, things like that. But harm OCD is intrusive thoughts about you harming someone or yourself in a brief term. So there's a lot more types, and how this all ties into anxiety and other mental health issues I will explain by now going through like my personal experience and my own life story solely about mental health. Okay, so when I was 4 years old, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and if you don't know what that is, you can look it up. There's a lot of information out there about ADHD. And I was put on Ritalin at the age of 4, so it was a very young age. However, my OCD didn't come about until I was about 9 years old. Now, a lot of people who are diagnosed with OCD often realize they've had it a lot younger than what they initially thought. But for people with ADHD, for example, they are more likely or more susceptible to have things like anxiety, OCD, depression, and things like that. It's the same with people with autism as well. They're just more likely. Again, there's research and reasons for that, and you can obviously look into that more, because if I had to go into that, this video would be hours long. But yeah, basically, I'm more susceptible to have anxiety or depression or eating disorders. I'm more susceptible to substance abuse, a lot of things because of my ADHD basically. So I remember my first OCD compulsion as a 9-year-old, or as an 8-year-old, sorry, did I say 8 or 9? It was one of those ages, 8 or 9. And I literally remember the thought clear as day, and it said, if your PlayStation game doesn't finish loading, if your PlayStation game finishes loading by the time you've run up and down your stairs one time, your whole family will die. And that thought hit me like a train. And I did it. I did that physical compulsion. So it was harm OCD and physical OCD. And obviously it, by that point, had a hold on me. And I did many other physical compulsions to alleviate, or what I thought was alleviating that thought. So I would respond to that thought and I would give in to that thought, turning the light switches on and off very frequently. That was another thing, because I was petrified that because of me, my family would die. And fortunately, in my situation, I was already seeing a psychiatrist, because children with ADHD have to see one, especially if you're medicated. So luckily, my parents spotted this and were able to get help very quickly, because I was already seeing a psychiatrist. And, you know, we thought at that time it had been nipped in the bud, you know, it sort of just went away, and I don't really remember any other disturbance until I was in my teenage years. And again, it's very common for your OCD to either flare up or to even come about when you hit puberty or well into your teenage years. Just because there's a lot going on, it's a really difficult time, you know, hormone fluctuation especially. I think hormones have a massive thing to do with how you're feeling, obviously, and how it can affect your anxiety levels. So I firmly know that's probably why it sort of came about around that age. So I was 16 years old. Again, I remember the thought clear as day. And when I was 16, I remember there was lots of chaotic things going on around me at the time. It was a really stressful year, and normally when you're stressed, of course, things like OCD or anxiety or depression, they can flare up or be made worse, like they can be caused by stressful situations. So I remember getting the thought, what if you've put poison in your dad's beer, and it literally just came out of nowhere, and I was the only one in the living room at the time. My dad's beer was just sitting there, and I had that thought and it paralyzed me. I can't tell you, if you've never had a panic attack or if you've never had OCD, you won't know unless you've had it. You will never know, because right now you could be hearing me and me saying, oh, I've had a thought and I've believed it was real, and you can be like, oh, how on earth can you believe it was real? It's ridiculous. Like, I promise you now, when you're in it, you believe it with your entire being. So imagine sitting there believing you've just killed your dad, like wholeheartedly believed that. And the panic attack I had, I mean, I went hot, I got all these hives and rashes, I felt like I was gonna be sick. And I was seeing spots, I couldn't even function. I literally felt so trapped. And having a panic attack, if you've never had one before, is petrifying. Your body is literally going on a fight or flight response. Your brain is acting in survival mode, but it has no idea why. And yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, my dad's alive. Didn't poison him. But by that point, because I was doing everything wrong in reacting to my OCD, it really caught hold once again, and unfortunately got really, really bad. So I got contamination OCD quite severely. It manifested from afraid I was poisoning drinks to being unable to prepare food for anybody in case I was poisoning it with whatever. Then it led to me being unable to eat food in case I was poisoning it and trying to kill myself. And because of this, I avoided social activities as well, because I didn't want to go to like sleepovers where there would be food around, things like that. And during this time, I also developed suicidal OCD. Now, just to clarify, I was never suicidal, but my OCD gave me suicidal thoughts. So that might sound a bit confusing to some. So basically, the OCD thought would come in, what if you've done this to kill yourself? That's basically what it is. It's not that you have any intention or want to kill yourself. It's your thought saying, oh, what if you do, but you just don't realize you do, if that makes sense. It's quite a common one. So I then stopped taking my ADHD medication because I was petrified that I was going to use that medication to overdose. And again, in my mind, all of the food I was eating, not only was I scared that I was going to contaminate myself, I was also scared that all the food I was eating wasn't food, but it was actually pills. Now that might sound completely outlandish to a lot of people, but that was the situation I was going through. I would leave little corners of my food to prove that it was food that I was eating and not pills. Some food I couldn't touch at all, such as Skittles, because to me they looked like pills. Cocoa Pops, they were too small, they looked like pills to me. Crisps were a struggle. I had to just leave each singular crisp corner, like, to prove it was crisps. And if other people prepared food for me, it was easier. So naturally, of course, I lost a lot of weight. Bearing in mind I was 16 at this time, I was a healthy, I want to say 8 stone 7, I think, at 5'3", and I lost a stone. So I went to 7 stone 7, which was a size, for me, a size UK 4 to 6. I got very thin very quickly. And during that time as well, because at this point my OCD had fully had its grip, and every new thought that came along, it was all just getting mixed up in there, and it was really brutal. So obviously I was having this self-harm OCD, I was having harm to others OCD, and then I began getting petrified of getting pregnant from surfaces or from the toilet seat, which again, I know sounds ridiculous because it's not even possible, but for me, it was the most possible thing on the planet. So I was really scared of sitting on toilet seats, on sofas, and again, more social activities going out the window. I didn't tell anyone the real reason why. And it was just a really, really hard time. And I felt like the only escape was when I was at school, because, you know, you kept busy. I always had to keep busy. If I slowed down for a second, the thoughts would be there 24/7. So during this time, here comes the next wave. I, obviously, as I said, I'd lost a lot of weight from all of these factors. and everyone said how good I looked, or some people obviously saying, gosh, you look really thin. My family noticed that too, but again, I didn't really, I mean, I verbalized to my parents a little bit, but at the same time I thought I was going crazy, and I was too afraid to tell people that I was convinced I was going crazy, or I was too afraid to go into detail about, hey, I'm getting thoughts about hurting myself, but I don't want to at the same time, or hey, I'm getting thoughts about hurting you, but I don't want to at the same time. You know, it's just a really hard thing at that time to like talk about. So yeah, people said I looked good, and I actually started to feel like good in how I looked, and I'd never been too like bothered before. I mean, I was a healthy size 8, I'd never been bothered, but I realised that my eating, all of this horrible OCD stuff had turned what I thought something, had made my body a positive, if that makes sense. So I now was thin because of OCD. So I developed an eating disorder as a result. It was a mild eating disorder. I have to give the people who've had severe eating disorders credit here. Mine was never to that level. It was a mild eating disorder, but it was more tied into my OCD, so obsessive measuring, obsessive calorie counting, portion control, things like that. Because it was the only, for me, that was a positive thing, and it was the only kind of control I had in my life. I mean, a lot of people with eating disorders will say that. It's kind of like a form of control. So that was kind of like my escape in a way, to have that to focus on. So obviously I was in a really bad way. I even got to the point where I was terrified to swallow. I was convinced that the saliva in my mouth wasn't saliva, it was pills. I know that sounds, again, really outlandish, but that's 100% how I felt. So I stopped swallowing. I would just spit out my saliva instead. Sounds kind of gross and brutal, but that is 100% the truth. I stopped swallowing. And I then started to barricade myself in my room because I was petrified I would kill people in my sleep. So basically my OCD had completely controlled every aspect of my life. It had manifested and manifested, and the problem was because I hadn't dealt with the first thought, a new one came in, so I was dealing with all of these jumbles of thoughts that were controlling every aspect of my life at this point. Even controlling me swallowing. That's how bad it was. So obviously my parents got me into cognitive behavioral therapy. And again, because I was still, like, I was 16, I was still seeing a psychiatrist from ADHD. So I was able to get a cognitive behavioral therapy specialist quite quickly, and they got to, it was through home visits as well. I didn't have to go anywhere, they visited me. It was the first time I'd ever had cognitive behavioral therapy, and it is a lifesaver. Anyone who says CBT didn't help them, I urge you to give it another go, because it might take a few tries, and it's mostly a lot of homework, which I'm really bad at. So, you know, it works. It really, really works. In fact, the kind of exposure therapy that I'm about to talk about is the only thing that works against OCD. But unfortunately, it is the hardest thing, or one of the hardest things you will ever do. And when I go into it, you'll see what I'm talking about. So I had my first round of cognitive behavioral therapy at about 16 to 17 years old, and it settled down. And I was like, great, I'm cured, it's all gone, you know, and I know exactly what I did wrong, and I'll tell you what I did wrong when I get into the advice and treatment side of things. But yeah, there was no consistency, basically. There's a little hint for you. I wasn't consistent. I naively assumed I was cured. And I wished at that time the therapist had been clear. Maybe they were, and I don't remember. I don't know. I'm not dissing them whatsoever. They were really helpful. But had they just been clear about the importance of doing all of this stuff at home to keep that OCD, like, you know, under control, I perhaps might have nipped it in the bud a bit sooner. But yeah, if you're wondering what cognitive behavioral therapy is. It is basically understanding the behaviors, understanding how your thoughts react to certain behaviors or thoughts. It's very much being in touch with your reactions, your feelings, and also a lot of exposure therapies thrown in as well. So for me, obviously, I had to do the exact opposite of what OCD wanted me to do. And what did OCD want me to do? It wanted me to avoid food and preparing food. It wanted me to avoid swallowing. And I had to take it in baby steps, which most people do. You know, you go from, you kind of go up like this, you know, start easily and it gets harder. So I started, for example, by making a cup of tea for my parents, and that was the hardest thing, one of the hardest things I've ever do. And that might sound ridiculous, but I was convinced utterly in my entire being that I was going to kill them. So, you know, it went from preparing tea to then preparing a bit of food, preparing myself food. Basically, it went from there. And eventually, you know, like I said, it all died down. The pregnancy thing, the fear of surfaces and things like that, that went away. But the harm OCD kind of always hovered there. It was always sort of lingering in the background. So I had a second round of cognitive behavioral therapy because I got a really bad case of false memory OCD. I believed I had done something terrible and not remembered doing it. I won't go into too much detail about the thought itself, but it was really, really hard to deal with. And that thought hit me at about the age of 21, 22, I want to say. And so yeah, that was a really hard one to deal with. And I got the cognitive behavioral therapy again. And some of you might be wondering, well, you've had cognitive behavioral therapy, why do you need more? The mistake I made, and the mistake a lot of people with OCD make, is that they kind of forget the process, or they don't apply the process consistently at home. And again, like I said, I'm going to be talking in detail about what you need to do to keep OCD and anxiety kind of like, ooh, you know what I mean? I then had another OCD relapse. The ages kind of blur of when this all happens, but I had a third round of a third round of cognitive behavioral therapy. And at that point, I was convinced I was cured again. And what did I not do? No homework. So I naively assumed, okay, I've had these many rounds of cognitive behavioral therapy. Surely by now, like, I'm good, like, I'm fine. Like, there is no way. Like, I naively thought my brain had run out of horrible thoughts to give me. There were no more left to give me. But it's not about how many thoughts your brain can give you, it's how you react to the thoughts. That's the key. And I knew that, but still. And my problem was anything bad that happened in my life, and let's clarify, obviously I'm only talking about the negative stuff that I experienced. Like, especially when I hit adulthood and meeting my husband, I've got a great life. I mean, yeah, bad things happen, but like, I am super lucky and blessed, and I am doing really well. So obviously when I'm telling you this difficult stuff, it's not meant to be like doom and gloom, and if you have OCD, your life will be awful and crap forever. And no, not at all. It's just you kind of bringing it along for the ride. So when your OCD is bad, obviously it's really bad, and it can like ruin your day a little bit, but at the same time there are still awesome and amazing experiences I had and really enjoyed during those OCD moments, if that makes sense. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. So yeah, OCD basically is like battling an addiction, and I don't think I really ever realized that until like a year or two ago. Because it came back again, and it came back after something like really hard happened in my life not too long ago, like maybe a few years ago, and it reacted to that, as it often does, and it sort of hit me again quite brutally, and it made me need a fourth round of cognitive behavioral therapy, and also I realised I needed some therapy to address other things that had happened when I was younger and things like that. So not only did I get cognitive behavioural therapy this time, I also got some run-of-the-mill therapy, and I think it's so important for anybody to get therapy, because there's a lot that your brain sort of tries to cope with or tries to get its head round, and it might deal with it in the wrong way. Like, for example, if something horrible has happened to somebody, perhaps they might turn to drugs. For me, I turned to my OCD. Like, your brain has its coping mechanisms, and sometimes it's really good to talk to like someone who's non-biased about every single little detail. And I, as a result of that, now have an amazing understanding about where my OCD came from. I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes OCD doesn't have a rhyme or a reason. Sometimes it just pops up. But for me, mine very much had a trigger, and it had a why, a when, and a what, basically. For me, I knew exactly why it was coming and where it came from. And I realised how terrified OCD made me feel about motherhood and about me having a child of my own, because of the harm OCD and because of like all the things that had like gone on around me. I was just petrified of being a mother, and so I drilled it into my brain that I didn't want children. I was like, I can't have children. Like, there were so many reasons why in my mind I couldn't have them, but it wasn't a physical reason why I couldn't have them. So if people said, oh, like, why can't you have kids? And I like, how do you explain? Oh, well, my brain tells me I'm gonna kill them. Or like, you know, a lot of mental health stuff runs in my family, and I didn't want to like, you know, pass it on and cause any problems for the kid, you know what I mean? Not that, like, people with mental health issues, of course they can have kids and they can make amazing parents and the kids can be amazing. It was a lot more deeper and more personal for me than just that. So please, I hope I didn't offend anyone by saying that. But for me, it was a very deep and personal reason why I was so worried about that. So I then, like, during this therapy, had to really talk about motherhood and whether having a child was my OCD talking or just me talking. And you know, we really got through the nitty-gritty, and we realized OCD had been making that decision for me, and that was quite a shock to the system, because I bottled that one up for a long time. I'm a very open person. I mean, hello, I'm telling you my whole life story right now. But the children thing, I still felt very confused about my emotions surrounding that. I mean, for example, I would avoid hanging out with little kids because I was scared I was going to hurt them and not remember doing it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I knew that was OCD, but at the same time, it made me naturally not want to be around kids because I was afraid of hurting them. And I was like, oh, I must not like them then. So yeah, there was a lot to sort of understand that. And that's why, like, another reason I'm doing this video is because please be aware that OCD, when you think you've got it so nipped in the bud, it can still be sneaking around, controlling something about your life, like, no matter what. So I didn't actually realize that OCD was holding the reins in how I felt about being a mum, and that's like shocking to me, because at that point I thought I'd understood everything about OCD, and I hadn't. And yeah, I mean, that was an amazing thing that me and my therapist sort of talked about and discovered together. And don't get me wrong, I don't feel like I've wasted any time or my life with knowing that that's what was going on, because I probably wasn't ready to have a kid anyway, and I'm 28 now, so yeah, like, it's fine and it is what it is. But I'm glad I was able to sort of, you know, figure that one out. So I finally made a decision for myself, and it was a decision that of course I'd gone back to but was too afraid to really commit to, and it was what's worse, OCD. So basically living the fear of OCD or just risking it. And what I mean by that is OCD makes you believe the worst has already happened. It makes you believe that you are the murderer, or you are suicidal, or you hate children, or you're gonna get pregnant from a toilet seat. How about I just risk it and see what happens? Okay, I'll risk being a murderer. Okay, I'll risk hating children. I'll risk killing myself. Okay, because I'm already living as if I've done it. So what's the difference, right? And it might sound easy, but it's really hard. It is so hard. I can't tell you. You are literally facing your worst fears. It's asking someone with a really severe arachnophobia to hold that spider. You are facing your phobias essentially head on, and you have to do it forever and constantly. It's like someone battling an addiction, you know? They always have to remind them, they always have to be in that battle, if that makes sense. Like, they can't just stop and take that addiction back, you know what I mean? They always have to push it away, no matter how much it kind of been like, hey, like, come on, you know what I mean? So we're now finally gonna go into what helps with OCD and anxiety and all that jazz. So the first thing I will say is medication. When I took medication for my OCD, I think I started when I was about 20 and I'm 28 now. It was life-changing because at the time I'd only been relying on CBT, and I also hadn't found all the other sources that I'm going to mention yet, and unfortunately it wasn't enough. And for a lot of people with OCD or anxiety, I don't think it is enough. And that's no disregard to your abilities or to anyone's abilities or to how amazing therapy is. It's kind of like, for me, and I've always said this, medication is like that little cheerleader in the corner that's just really cheering you on. It's that little boost that you need. So I think medication and therapy very much go hand in hand. I don't think you can have one without the other necessarily. I think therapy is probably more important, but again, I am not an expert or a professional, but it does seem to see that way from what I've read and from what I've experienced. So no shame in taking medication. Like right now, I'm in the best place with my OCD that I've ever been, and I've said that before, so it's nice to know that I'm getting better and better. And I've always had, like, I've never had depression or anything. I'm extremely lucky because I can't imagine how hard it must be to have depression and OCD. Like, you people are absolute warriors. Like, I think I'm a warrior, not to toot my hoot, but I think I am such a brave, awesome and amazing person. Not even sorry. Like, the stuff that I've had to face head on, I'm amazing. I'm dead clever. So, you know, give yourself a pat on the bloody back, because my goodness gracious me, it is so hard to battle OCD. Oh, I can't tell you. But yeah, no shame in taking medication. I'll happily take it for the rest of my life. Even my OCD goes away, I don't care. There's a little boosty beta blocker dude or whatever it is. He might not be what it is. I don't know. He's a medication. He does great. He's in my corner constantly, no matter what I'm doing, being like, oh, just so you know, I got you. You know, great. I'll have you forever. Cheers, bud. Yeah. The other thing, and this is good for trauma as well, is the 5-4-3-2-1 method. And that is really good to keep you in the present. So the problem with OCD is obviously it makes your cogs turn. It gets you right into that thought, and you know, you're analysing the thought, which is the worst thing you can do. And you're up in that thought, or you're up in that, you know, maybe you've had a bad memory, or you're thinking about something really negative, and you're in that, and you're feeling really awful, and you're just like, ugh. The 5-4-3-2-1 method grounds you and gets you back into the present and makes you aware of what's going on around you currently. And it's really important. That's why they say there's no time like the present. It's really important to be present and trying not to dwell about what's been or what's going. You know what I mean? So how you do that is, for example, it can be 5 things you see, and then you'll list the 5 things that you see around you. And then it can be the 4 things you hear. And then it can be the 3 things that you touch, the 2 things you smell, and the 1 thing you taste. So basically, you don't have to do it in that exact order. As long as you're using all of your 5 senses, you're good. I mean, if you can taste 5 things, okie dokie, you know, you taste the 5 things, that's fine. But yeah, the 5-4-3-2-1 method is really good just to get you back in the moment and be like, hey, stop thinking about that thing that shouldn't be thought about, you know what I mean? That moves on to my next thing. No analysing. I can't tell you how hard it is to resist the analysing. OCD is all about the analysing. Your brain gets a thought, and bear in mind, every single person on the planet gets scary or weird or disturbing or horrible or funny, whatever thoughts. The difference between someone with OCD and without is the person without will be like, oh, that was a weird thought, and carry on with their day. The person with OCD is like, why did I get that thought? What does that thought mean? Where did this thought come from? Am I a bad person? And it steamrolls. Do you know what I mean? So no analysing. And this takes practice, of course. So I might get a new thought coming along and I'll just be like, nope. You know, you could say it out loud if you want. You can say it in your head, doesn't matter. Or you can say like, I'm disregarding it. No. Be like, oh, what if you took a swig of water there? What if you also took a ton of pills with that swig of water? I still get that thought to this day. And I'll be like, yeah, sure did. Or I'll be like, nope, not listening. And I know that sounds a bit strange, but that's what I do. It's the correct thing to do. And that moves on to my next thing, which is agreeing with the thoughts. Now, again, this is another very successful technique, and you should try to move up to agreeing if you can, because, you know, it's easier said than done ignoring those thoughts or being like, no, I'm not gonna listen, because my goodness, the more you ignore it, the more they will drill in. So when you're feeling brave enough, although to be honest, you might never feel brave enough, sometimes you just got to bite the bullet and do it, agree with it. So I'll be like, yeah, I have taken a ton of pills. Yep, I'm gonna die. Yep, my family's gonna be devastated. I'm gonna leave them in horrible, horrible pain. Yes. Just agree. It's really hard to do at first, but then it kind of becomes a bit funny, you know? You're just like, yeah, I'm a murderer. Sorry, that was my cat. Look at, there's a cat butt there. I was like, yeah, I'm a murderer. I'm the worst mother in the world. I'm not a mother yet, by the way. But as an example. So yeah, that's another really good technique. And you're probably thinking, okay, well, I need to know more about these techniques. I'm going to tell you where to find all of this information. Don't worry. So another thing you can do to really help is listen to other people's stories. Or there's something called My OCD Stories on Spotify. It's an OCD podcast, and it's basically people telling stories about their OCD experiences, and it's really helpful because you know you're not alone. Obviously, if you're still in a very delicate place and you're afraid of getting triggered by new thoughts and themes, perhaps you just might want to dip your toe in rather than really listen to them, but just see how you go. I mean, obviously, eventually you want to get to the point where you're not worried about a new thought or you're not worried about getting triggered because, you know, thought's a thought, but obviously everyone's at a different stage in their OCD journey. Another thing is super cliche, I know, but yoga, it really works. Like, there's a reason people who do yoga are like chill as a hill, do you know what I mean? Like, every time I do yoga, I mean, I haven't done it in a while, but you know, it's quarantine, man, everything's crazy. But yoga, oh my gosh, does it feel amazing. And it's been proven to do wonders for mental health, and I can see why. It's really, really good for OCD. So if you're having like a bit of a panic attack or you're having some anxiety, do some yoga. Seriously, it's amazing. Another one I would recommend is being consistent. That is the most important. If you can take anything away, take consistency away. It is the most important thing you'll ever do for your OCD. Like I've said, you're essentially battling an addiction. You have to be consistent. I'm not going to say I'm cured of OCD because I have fully, unconditionally accepted that OCD might pop up again, or it might not. I have accepted this possibility. Being in fear of it coming along is where you can go wrong. Never be in fear of it. It's really hard to do. You'll get there. Don't fear it coming along again. Just be like, oh, it might come along again. It's okay. You know, it's fine. I'm going to be consistent. I know what I need to do. Those other times when I had therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, I would get all that information at that time, but my ditzy little brain would kind of forget about it a few months later, and boom, I'd be back in the old cycle again. I didn't do any stuff at home, or I didn't maybe take notes and keep them with me. Do you know what I mean? That's where I went wrong. Please, for the love of God, you can't cure OCD without consistency. And some of you might be thinking, well, can you even cure it? Actually, you can. There is no such thing as not being able to cure it. The difference is how you treat it. That makes sense. So yeah, don't avoid triggers, face them head on. Again, that's like with agreeing with the thought. Always face your triggers head on. Your brain tells you, what if you've just put some poison in that drink you've made for your lovely, wonderful husband? Yeah, sure did, and I'm gonna finish pouring that drink and I'm gonna give it to him. You know what I mean? Like, you cannot avoid doing it. Obviously, like I said, everyone is in their own OCD journey. You might not be ready to do any physical combat triggers or whatever you call it. That's fine, but it will help. And again, you need to do it in your own time with your own professional. But yeah, I'm turning the page now. We're nearly done. And the next one is bringing it along for the ride. Like I said before, just because I've spoken about a lot of doom and gloom does not mean whatsoever that my life was just this hideous, horrible thing. Absolutely not. You can still have OCD or anxiety or depression or an eating disorder, whatever it is, and still have an amazing, awesome, fun life. Like, try not to take these moments for granted, you know what I mean? Like, OCD does not define you, and if anything, it makes you a heck of a lot braver than a lot of other people because you've had to deal with some horrible fears, you know what I mean? So no, like, I'm good. I'm very good. It's all good. So the two names I'm going to give you who have not only provided me with a lot of this information, but can also provide you with free help as well, are, the first is called Ali Graymond. She is an OCD expert. You can pay for therapy services with her if you want, and I 100% recommend it. If you need therapy, go for it. She is amazing, but she also does free podcasts on Spotify and free YouTube videos as well. I listen to her videos maybe once or twice a week. No matter how great I'm feeling, it doesn't matter. I listen to them because I have to be consistent. You know, that is the downfall of OCD, I'm afraid. You will forever probably have to do this, but that's okay, you know, not a problem. I do it when I'm trying to fall asleep. It's great. And it's only like a 4-minute video, do you know what I mean? And she does OCD Q&As, and you can put comments and she'll answer them. She's amazing, and she has been life-changing. She had OCD herself. I believe she said it was crippling as well. So she knows it, and she's now helping others go through it. And honestly, without her, I don't know if I would be at this point, because I was relying on the waiting list for therapy, and I wasn't constant. Without her, I wasn't consistent, put it that way. Another person I'm going to mention is someone called Robert Bray. He runs the OCD Recovery on Facebook, and he also has an Instagram page by the same name, and he does live videos on Instagram and on Facebook as well. He is based in the UK. He also does therapy for a charge as well, I believe, and he'll just have these little Instagram posts, and they'll just resonate with OCD or anxiety so much, and I like to screenshot them and keep them in a little folder. And you know, like, if you don't have time to listen to a video, for example, you can just look at those screenshots and they'll remind you about the process of OCD and what you need to do, because believe it or not, it's so easy to forget. You know, you're literally retraining your brain. A lot of people think, well, where does OCD come from, or like, how can you possibly get rid of it? Basically your brain is in survival mode. It doesn't know why. Your brain doesn't know why it's giving you any of these weird thoughts. It's your brain, you know, but you have to retrain your brain to react to the thoughts differently. You have to accept the fact that you are going to get these thoughts no matter what. You can't stop the thoughts. It's how you react to the thoughts. That's the key, and it takes practice. And he very much encourages the idea of unconditional self-acceptance. And what I mean by that is accepting every possibility, accepting yourself no matter what. Like, for example, your OCD is going to tell you you're a killer. Okay, I completely accept wholeheartedly that I'm a killer and a horrible person. You know, it's getting rid of the fear. It's not having any fear. And obviously, you know, within reason, you know, like if I see, you know, I don't know, really deep ocean. I don't like oceans, they're really scary. But yeah, I'm gonna poop me pants, alright? But I'm totally fine with being a murderer. I'm not a murderer, but you know what I mean. So that's another thing. And another thing, if you're UK based, because I don't know about anywhere else, sorry, is Talking Matters. I believe it's all over the UK, and it's free, and you can get on the waiting list and get some therapy or CBT, and that's every time I've had cognitive behavioural therapy, I went to Talking Matters. The waiting lists differ and vary. Once I was on the waiting list for only a few months, once I was on there for 7 months, it just varies, but it's really good, and you know, Talking Matters is amazing. Now for the final part after all this chitty-chatty is the silver lining. And I hope I've made it very clear that there's lots of silver linings. So, the one thing you'll get, well, the many things you'll get, is you'll be the bravest little potato in the world. Like I've said before, you faced all of your fears head on. You faced them all. You have, another thing you have is insight. You understand your brain and the brain itself probably better than most people. You will literally become an expert on your feelings and your thoughts and your brain because you have to learn it in order to, you know, recover from OCD. So I'm a little expert on feelings, on thoughts, on emotions, what they mean, you know, how, like trauma, how that works, why we get these thoughts, what my brain is doing. Like, I'm a little fountain of OCD knowledge. I'm a little expert. Even my therapist said, you know as much as me. I was like, thanks. So yeah. You'll have a lot of self-awareness. Obviously, you're always knowing kind of where your brain's at, you know, like, you know what your brain's doing. You're going to be aware. You're going to be aware when you get to a certain point in your life, you'll know what's going to trigger you. For example, if someone, you know, was like, hey, I'm going to come around with my newborn baby, I know my OCD is gonna try and trigger me there. I know it's going to be like, oh no, newborn baby, you're going to kill it. You're going to kill that newborn baby. And I'm ready for that trigger. You'll get to that point where you know you'll be able to preempt, oh my gosh, what is that word? You'll be able to, you'll have a premonition about when OCD is going to attack. You'll know. That makes sense. I'm so sorry if it doesn't. But yeah, so I now know when my OCD is going to try and trigger me. And the sooner you know, great. Or if it triggers you at a certain time of day, great, because you can prepare yourself. Do you know what I mean? You're basically at a constant war. That sounds really depressing, but it's really good. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And yes, thank you so much for watching, because this is a really long video. I'm so sorry. Okay, bye-bye.